Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for whoever is going to be listening to this. My name is Ned Dennison. I'm a Cork, Ireland marathon swimmer and organizer. I'm also the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have an initiative going on for the last couple of years to help identify and promote swimmers with physical disabilities. A couple of weeks ago, I ran into Julian, where I've been on a nodding acquaintance for the past few years at various events around the south of Ireland. We had a longer conversation, Myrtleville to Church Bay. We talked about doing an interview to talk about his successes, challenges, and observations of local swimming. And it came to a head a couple of weeks ago at the end of the Lee Swim. I kind of positioned myself to congratulate people. They come out of a 2-kilometer swim where they're horizontal, perhaps the only time some of these people have ever raced in the water. They're perhaps a little disoriented, and they go to vertical up a small set of steps to the land. And I looked down and I saw Julian coming out, and I said, okay, this is going to be interesting. My colleague at the finish, Liam Maher, an English Channel marathon swimmer, calmly reached over, picked up a set of crutches that were Julian's obviously, and handed it to him. And I thought, we look really good on this, and I wonder how this all happened. So I'm going to turn it over to Julian to introduce himself, tell you a little bit about where he grew up and what he's done for sports in the last 40 plus years.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ned. I'm delighted to be interviewed. I've had a lot of, again, it's been a good nodding experience with yourself and with all swimmers and all athletes, really. I've had a lot of fun over the last 40 years. Childhood-wise, I moved over here when I was 6 years old from the UK with my parents. And that was quite an event because being tall and blonde, though I don't have any hair now, with an English accent in 1969 was probably not the best introduction to Cork City life, but it was formative and robust, and we had a good time. I did a lot of swimming, first of all with Eglinton Swim Club, and up through the years with Sunder's Well. And I was a reasonably good age grouper. I was selected on national squads, which was fun. But in 1982, I think it was, I had a bad motorcycle accident and unfortunately lost my right leg, so I've no knee joint. But I was very lucky because my arm is full of metal, but I kept my arm, so that was very important, just mobility wise. And I've been very lucky too, because you know, different people have different problems, but the prosthetics I use are very mobile and they suit me and they don't give me much trouble, and I've pretty much broken everything they've thrown at me. Put millions and millions of cycles on them, which helps everybody really. It lets the prosthetic people see what can be done. So, you know, I've been a very lucky man as far as that's concerned. So the discomfort and the problems that I've had sort of balance very well. I played a lot of basketball, a lot of hockey, a bit of rugby badly. I learned to play rugby in France, and that was fun, I must say. So it was a good journey. It was a good journey up until then, and then beyond that, I was supported very well by family and friends during my rehab, which still sort of continues. You know, I bump into marvelous people and very well supported from the swimming community. People who know me just sort of leave me alone now, and if I ask for help, it's freely given. That's quite nice too. Cork Masters Swim Club have to have a big mention. They helped me in my early years and darker moments. But yeah, I'm sort of rehab now. I'm sort of much more peaceful during the last 5 years. Very much involved in open water swimming now. I do a lot of cycling. We're very lucky. I live up here with my lovely girlfriend Niamh in the Nagle Mountains near Fermoy. And we're always doing something or other. So yeah, so is there anything you want to ask me about that particularly?
Julian, from the time of your accident, how long was it before you were back in the water and feeling physically and mentally 50%?
Very quickly, about a year and a half. But it was very funny because, you know, legs give you balance. So every time I turned to breathe on my right hand side with front crawl, I'd actually turn right over. So that created much hilarity. So yeah, 50%. Yeah, it took a while to get to 80%. But, you know, I don't think we're ever really truly 100% unless you're totally mad. But it's been an interesting journey, and you know, people, I must be reasonably approachable. People come up and ask me, and of course children are a joy because they'll always ask you what their parents want to know, and their parents sort of give them a bang over the head and say, don't ask them that question. But everybody wants to know what happens, and you know, how uncomfortable or comfortable you are. For me, having a prosthetic leg really is rather like putting your socks on in the morning. I don't really even think about it usually.
So as a competitive age group swimmer, you don't get on the blocks unless you plan to win or hope to win or try to win. When I do the briefing for the Lee Swim, I always say, you know, for some of you, this is an experience. You're
Yes.
going out to enjoy the swim. For others, it's a race. And then there's the hybrid. And I always mention the example of the guy I talked to a couple of years ago. He said, look, he said, I'm not racing. I'm just out to enjoy myself. He said, but my brother-in-law is not going to beat me. So on something like the Lee Swim, how are you approaching this, Julian?
Well, I approach it in a semi-competitive way. I'm doing such a lot of teaching and coaching now that swimming-wise, that I don't have enough time to be fit. I find that my recovery, because you can call it a disability, I don't really think about it like that, but because I'm disadvantaged, I find that my recovery time is much longer. So any training I do, it has a knock-on effect time-wise, and I just really don't have enough time for training and recovery. So the answer to that is I would approach it in a semi-competitive way. I'd certainly be looking at my friends who I swim with and saying, what are we going to do? A new departure for me has been skin swimming during the last couple of years, so I prefer not to swim in a suit anymore, if at all possible. So yeah, we have a friendly rivalry, and sometimes it's serious, you know, but
so when you find yourself out there and there's a trail of bubbles just in front of you, are you tempted to draft the whole way? You're going to draft a little bit and try to get around them. And when somebody comes up on your breathing side, what's your reaction?
Well, I think the reaction is to assess and see, are they in a suit? Are they in skins? Do they have any hair? Are they ancient? If they look older than me, certainly I'm gonna try and get a wiggle on. But honestly, I'm not that quick. I'm only sort of medium pace, so I can't compete with you fast guys. But I still frighten the young fellas occasionally, and that's fun, you know. But I think really it's to be competitive within yourself and within your own field. I'm not one of these guys who feels that I have to go out there just because I can go out there, you know, or because I'm semi-able to go out there and compete. I'm much more happy assessing the situation and having a friendly swim, and you know, not perhaps creating a problem for everybody else, because organizers can get a bit startled if you arrive up with a set of crutches. And you know, I try not to be demanding, simply because you know, if it's uncomfortable for them, then it's going to be uncomfortable for me as well. So
you've been in the open water circuit in Cork for a few years. If I go back 20 years, which maybe is a long time for a lot of people,
yeah.
20 years ago, you would kind of roll up to the Sandy Cove Island Challenge. There'd be 40 people there. You might give them a tenner, was probably Irish pounds back then.
Yes, that's true.
And you'd give your name and off you'd go.
Yeah.
For the recent Lee Swim, the registrations opened up. I think there were 400 registrations taken in the first 24 hours.
Yeah.
Ended up as capped at 500. If you didn't register within a week, you didn't get in. from a somewhat old timer standpoint, what have you seen over the years? What's the good things? What are the bad things about the changes, the explosion in the sport?
Well, certainly, I mean, it has been good to have the exposure for swimming. You know, that the explosion in the sport has brought to us. The problem for me is that I suppose I look at things with rose-tinted spectacles a bit, you know, and whereas you used to know absolutely everybody, if you went down the Myrtleville, Sandy Cove, up to Galway, now I might know 10% of the people. And I feel a bit, sorry is the wrong word, but I wish people would just take a bit more time to look around and enjoy it a bit, you know, instead of looking at their watch all the time. I think they're missing out a bit on what the open water experience is. Also, you know, people have to be a little bit careful. I had this conversation with Frank Hallisey. You know, they see a one-legged fella getting into the sea in 12 or 14 degrees. And I know for Frank that that wouldn't be unusual. That'd be warm for him. But, and then he says, Frank, who's a small fat fella, as he would describe himself, and they look at us and say, how hard can it be? And the answer is, well, if you're not careful, you have to be fished out. So, you know, you guys, from an organization point of view, do it very well and do warn of the pitfalls. And we've all got to mind each other and be careful. So, you know, those are the changes that I've seen, but all positive, you know, for other people for dealing with the water.
I have to say, I steered clear of Christmas Day and New Year's Day swims. I see people I've not seen all year. I see young men in board shorts standing around having cans of lager, trying to impress the women, and then getting into 6, 7, 8, 9 degree water and trying to remember how to swim from 10 years ago. And it just scares me from a safety standpoint.
Yes, you know, and even when they get out, you know, that's the real danger point. I agree with you. We tend to do our Christmas swim up here in Fermoy either a day later or a day earlier, which can be fun as well. But, you know, I'm doing a lot of work with Mallow Swim Club now, with coaching and teaching. And I did my open water level 2 coach's badge a couple of years ago. So I'm doing a bit with Swim Ireland. And the way things are going for me now, really, I'm sort of helping people overcome their fear of water. And I keep getting approached by all these guys saying, you know, can you help put my face in the water? And it actually doesn't take that long, just give a hand and a push forward. And then they sort of motor off, which is brilliant, you know. So I like doing that. It's something that makes me tick.
Tell us about your average week. How many times are you swimming? How many times are you cycling? What does your exercise in an average week look like?
Well, an average week, I suppose I'd be in the river or the sea probably 3 times. Lucky to get 1 pool session in, and then a couple of bikes, really, between 50 and 100 kilometers if I'm lucky. You know, that works very well. I succumbed and bought an electric bike, which I don't know. The
Interview's over. Interview's over. You'll be getting one of those sea fans next. I'll see you come by me with one of those big fans in the water.
That could be true, but you still got to turn the pedals for it to work. But I've been adjusting my regular road bike, and that's been working very well. But you know, life has been very kind to me, and every time that things have looked dire, something has turned up. So I've got enough money, and I'm not rich, but I'm very lucky, and that's the way things have worked, really. You know, and it's lovely to be here with Niamh, and sometimes there's a deer looking in the window in the morning, and that's heartening.
Talk to us about access. So I was incredibly impressed at the end of the Lee swim, where no bother at all. Your crutches appeared out of a small space behind Liam Marr, who's he thinks he's a bit taller than me, and he might be, but yes. I'm never going to acknowledge that publicly. So I'm familiar a little bit with the Blackwater in Fermoy. We're forever swimming next to the rowing club. I tend to leave my bag in the car. I've got a lockbox. I walk down my flip-flops, and which no one ever wants to steal because they're kind of torn. And I gently go down the slipway because sometimes it's a bit greasy. I launch myself in the water and I head upstream. How do you get into the Blackwater? Where do you leave your stuff? And have you had issues?
Well, there's always issues. So one day, some group of young fellows jumped on my crutches and broke them. So that was an interesting hop back to the car when I got out. But that doesn't happen very often. I kind of leave a sign on them saying, please don't disturb my crutches. And that seems to work. If we're swimming from place to place, which we do, or sometimes we'll go 4 or 6 kilometers downstream. It's just simply a question of leaving a car down there, my leg in the car, and an extra set of crutches down there to get out, which is what I did with the Lee swim. I had one set above to get in and another set below to get out. But I think that for any level of disability, ability, any sort of disadvantage, the best thing to give yourself is time to get there early, time to have a look and a think. If it's an organized event, the last thing you want to be doing is rushing. Get there the day before if you can, have a look at the situation, whether you're in a wheelchair or on crutches, or just have a wooden leg which you have to chuck off at the seaside. People are very, very helpful, especially with triathlon. I've noticed lately that people are very, very helpful, and if you ask for help, you'll certainly get it. But just because you have a disability, it doesn't entitle you to get in and do these things. For instance, at the Myrtleville Church Bay swim, I was actually happier in the kayak, picking up the back markers, the swimmers, because the exit is very difficult for me and it takes a lot of the enjoyment away. And then somebody has to look after me, and I'm not comfortable, but it just takes away from the enjoyment. And if you're taking somebody away, then they're not looking at or enjoying their own event. So I'm happy to do things like that.
Walk us through the start of Myrtleville. Are you able to go down on the sand in a pair of crutches? Does somebody then take them from you? How do you start that?
Well, but yes, exactly like that. I'd chuck. I can either fire them up the beach if it's high tide and they stay there, or somebody will just take them up the beach and put them above the high tide mark. And that works well. I mean, I'm going there tomorrow, and that's what I'll do. Tides will be all right. And I tend to sort of get in, and I can hop into the water and then sort of slither in like a seal. That works for me. I'm very comfortable swimming in 6 inches of water,
So on the exit, I reckon you had an advantage. The exit on Church Bay, for those who aren't familiar, is stony.
Yes.
And so I get out, I go, ooh, ah, ee, ah, ooh, ah, 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 ah. And then I spend the next 3 or 4 minutes looking for my blue dry bag in a mountain of bags going ee, ah, ooh, ah, 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 on my feet. So I'm thinking, Julian, somebody met you at the shore with like a flip-flop or something, and you didn't have to do that.
Well, yeah, or you have it planted, one or the other. So, and then I've got this huge, enormous red bag that I have my leg in, so that's easily spotted. But of course, then I've only got 1 foot to think about then. So, that works well. But it's good to be involved.
I have somebody has approached me to join our Cork Distance Week next year that has severe disability from the waist down.
Okay.
And we're talking about access, and it's not clear to me whether they're 100% wheelchair or can use crutches. So I said, well, okay, high water at Sandico is probably pretty easy because the slipway's right there. Low water, I don't know how the wheelchair is going to cope. Does it have fat tires, slim tires? He said that the swims are fine. We went out to Phoenix for a swim. We kind of walked across a field with a bunch of bunny rabbits. And then there was a 60-degree stony bank, which we sort of went down on our backsides and flopped forward. I thought that could be a bit of a challenge. And then
Yes.
finally, Loch Eyne, I don't know if you swum there,
Yes, I
but
have.
the rapids go different directions. So we had
Yes.
one swimmer this year with more moderate lower body issues. We were able to help him up. We were able to make sure he was able to walk the couple of 100 meters to get in the other side.
Okay.
But there's no wheelchair there, and I'm not sure how we get a set of crutches there. And the rocks are pretty treacherous. So there are some real access issues. Have you experienced these access issues in swims in Cork?
I have, but I only made the mistake once of not being able to get out when the tide was filling, and it was getting quite choppy, and it was really difficult. I think really it depends how precious you are. It's very easy. I mean, I don't mind climbing up a rope if I have to. If somebody has lower body issues like that, are they happy being carted along in a blanket? A lot of people wouldn't be, you know, so I suppose that's what I'd be finding out. I'd be asking direct questions. No, I mean, look, we've got a swim down here in Fermoy in Ballydorone, and it's beautiful. You can go 4 kilometers up or 4 kilometers down. So it's my ambition this year is to swim right the way down and right the way back up again in skins, but I'm going to have to pick my day and do a bit of training for that. But the midpoint is difficult. It's got a ladder, there's metal stanchions at the top. You've just got to be really careful and you know, not be afraid to go back into the water and rethink it, really.
So just for me personally on access, I don't do well on small metal ladders with both legs.
Yeah.
I don't do well getting into a rib or boat where they throw that ridiculous small ladder out.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievably hard. And I end up dragging myself over the side of the boat, hoping I'm not lost anything in the process. And then I have this not so fond memory of a training swim, I guess it was Wicklow, in fairly big surf. And I had trouble getting my 2 legs underneath me successfully. Yes. So I lay there in a ball being smashed around on a sandy beach for a little while, not particularly panicking, but just thinking to myself, okay, probably do this for 30 seconds or so. But at some point, Ned, you really need to make a decision. Do you kind of go back out and take another shot, or do you just kind of see if you can crawl out somehow?
Yeah. Well, you see, from my point of view, you're limited in your options, really. So in heavy surf, I tend to slither in as far as I can and simply get my knees under me and behave like a crab, and then sort of knees and hands up the beach. And if there's waves crashing in, you just behave like a hermit crab and crouch down. But that actually works very well. But it's not a method that I choose very often. So that would be my answer there. But you know, you have to be inventive, and you have to be not afraid in the sea, especially once you start doubting yourself. There is always an exit. There's always a solution. You just got to think it through, really.
I would applaud you on one thing, Julian. As a swim organizer, I can deal with just about anything if I know in advance. What I don't deal with well is a surprise.
Yes.
So you were talking about perhaps going a day early and checking out the course. We've had a number of swimmers with, you know, hearing difficulties that have come to the events. And for them, I tend to get the briefing to them in writing beforehand. And if there's any last minute changes, I almost give them a special briefing face to face. So I go, okay, we're changing point A to point B because of the following. So, yes. Because if you stand up in front of 200 people and yell out instructions, that doesn't help somebody with a hearing issue.
Yes.
Likewise for yourself, if I know that you're going to want a set of crutches at the end on a point-to-point swim, then we can make an arrangement for it. But if you
Yes.
show up at the start with 2 sets of crutches and say, can you make sure these are waiting for me? The van has trouble getting there in time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, and it's up to the guy with the disability or the girl really to make themselves known and heard and understood as well. I agree with you about hearing difficulties. We've got a girl whose swimming has come on beautifully, but she uses a hearing aid that you wouldn't know is there. And when she takes those out, you have to be very direct with your instruction or with information, you know.
I interviewed a lady a couple of years ago. She suffered from the polio-related disease and affected her legs. She did an incredible swim across Loch Ness in Scotland, one of the toughest swims in our sport. And the compromise they made was they had a support boat with a kind of a front-loading bucket on it. It was actually for transporting animals. So in the event that she had to exit the water, they had the ability to help her get out of the water, which I thought was quite a clever thing, but they'd arranged that all in advance. Final question for you. What should we expect from you in the future for sporting and particularly open water swimming adventures? What have you got in your head?
Well, my longest swim so far is 8 kilometers. So I'd like to do a distance between 5 and 10. I'm not chasing my 10-kilometer cap particularly, but it's there in the back of the mind. I've got the GAD swim now shortly, which is 5 kilometers, which is probably about my mark at the moment. I'm doing Union Hall, which is just a lovely social dip there. It's Sunday, I think it is. So yeah, so I'll be popping up left, right, and centre everywhere now that things have restarted after COVID. And I'll try, as we did the other year, to stay in skins in the winter. I struggle below about 12 degrees, so I will be back into some kind of suit then. But you know, I'm going to just try and be out there really, and to be social, and you know, to promote swimming and be as safe as possible. So that's my plan.
So for people who aren't aware, and we'll add some of Julian's competitive nature into this, we have a special swim cap for 10-kilometer swimmers who are based in County Cork. 10 kilometers is also the definition of a marathon swimmer. So when you've done 10K, you can call yourself a marathon swimmer. So those are 2 things to keep Julian going on the competitive side. And then, excuse me, I think the final thing on 10 kilometers is many swimmers can swim, excuse me, 5 kilometers without adding liquid or taking a gel or anything like that. You start to do 10 kilometers, you almost need to have a feed, typically a carbo drink of some kind, which doesn't usually fit in the back of your Speedo. And that's a whole nother element to the sport. And for me, I played water polo, so I do an egg beater. I get my chin out of the water when I have my feed. For a swimmer with the use of only one leg, you're going to have to find a way to feed, probably on your back. Yes. And probably facing the waves. You'd think it would be the other way, but if you face the waves, you've got a chance of seeing them. And if you've got a pull top bottle, that's a time to stick it in your mouth and close your eyes.
True. Good advice, certainly. Yes, I will certainly employ that. And hopefully I'll be getting my cap before Christmas, but we'll see.
I look forward to being there to present it to you. Thank you very much, Julian, for your time today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be interviewed. Thank you, Ned. Bye-bye.